The cold bit through Delilah Turner's threadbare dress like 1,000 knives, and she wondered if this frozen hillside outside Columbia, California, would be her grave. Her father's wagon had disappeared down the mountain trail an hour ago, leaving nothing but wheel ruts in the January snow, and the echo of her stepmother's shrill voice declaring her a burden they could no longer afford to feed. At 19 years old, Delilah had survived her mother's death, 3 harsh winters working her fingers raw, and her father's remarriage to a woman who saw her as competition rather than kin. But she had not expected to be cast out like unwanted livestock in the dead of winter in 1875. She wrapped her arms around herself, teeth chattering so violently she bit her tongue and tasted copper. The Sierra Nevada mountains stretched endlessly around her, pine trees heavy with snow, and the temperature dropping as the sun began its descent behind the peaks. Her fingers had gone numb 20 minutes ago, and her toes felt like blocks of ice in her worn boots. Delilah knew the signs of frostbite from the miners who had stumbled into Columbia missing fingers and toes, their flesh blackened and dead. She had perhaps another hour before she lost consciousness, maybe 2 if she was unlucky enough to suffer longer. The sound of hoofbeats on the frozen trail made her lift her head. Through blurring vision, she saw a rider approaching on a massive bay horse, the animal's breath creating clouds of steam in the frigid air. The man sat tall in the saddle, broad-shouldered beneath a heavy coat, his hat pulled low against the wind. Delilah tried to call out, but her voice emerged as barely a whisper, her vocal cords frozen along with the rest of her. The rider pulled his horse to a stop, and she heard his sharp intake of breath. "Jesus Christ," he muttered, swinging down from the saddle with practiced ease. He was beside her in 3 long strides, and Delilah found herself looking up into a face weathered by sun and wind, with eyes the color of summer grass and a jaw dark with several days' worth of beard. He could not have been more than 25, but he moved with the confidence of someone who had lived hard and survived. "Who left you here?" His voice was rough, edged with anger that was not directed at her. When she could not answer, could only stare at him with eyes that felt frozen in their sockets, he cursed again and stripped off his heavy sheepskin coat. The garment still held his warmth as he wrapped it around her shoulders, and Delilah made a sound that was half sob, half sigh of relief. "Can you stand?" She could not. Her legs buckled when she tried, and suddenly his arms were around her, lifting her as though she weighed nothing at all. He carried her to his horse and somehow managed to mount while holding her, settling her across his lap with one arm locked around her waist. The coat enveloped them both as he pulled her tight against his chest, and she felt the steady, strong beat of his heart through his shirt. "You're mine now," he said, his breath warm against her frozen ear as he turned his horse toward Columbia. "Nobody's going to leave you in the frost again, you hear me? I'm Vincent Novak, and I'm taking you home." Delilah wanted to argue, to tell him she was not his or anyone's, but the warmth of his body and the rocking motion of the horse were lulling her towards sleep. She fought it, knowing that to sleep in the cold was to die, but Vincent seemed to sense her struggle. "Stay awake," he commanded, his voice sharp. "Talk to me. What's your name?" Delilah, she managed through chattering teeth. "Turner. Delilah Turner. Pretty name." "How'd you end up on that hillside?" The shame of it burned through the cold. "My father. His new wife. They said they could not feed me through the winter." The arm around her waist tightened, and she felt the tension in his body. "Your father left his own daughter to freeze to death." "I am not his wife's daughter, just a reminder of his first wife. She wanted me gone." Vincent made a sound low in his throat that reminded Delilah of a growl. "Your father's a coward and a bastard, pardon my language. No real man abandons his child, blood or not. They rode in silence for a while, the horse picking its way carefully down the mountain trail. Delilah could feel sensation beginning to return to her extremities, painful pins and needles that made her gasp. Vincent adjusted the coat around her, tucking it more securely. "It's going to hurt like hell as you warm up," he told her. "That's a good sign. Means you're not too far gone. My place is another 20 minutes. I've got a good fire and hot coffee. You're going to be all right, Delilah Turner." "Why are you helping me?" The question emerged before she could stop it. "You do not know me. Do not need to know you to know leaving someone to die in the cold is wrong." His voice softened slightly. "Besides, I know what it's like to be alone. I came to California 7 years ago with nothing but the clothes on my back and a horse I won in a card game. Other folks helped me when I needed it. Figure I owe the universe a debt." Delilah studied his face, what she could see of it from her position against his chest. He had strong features, a straight nose that looked like it might have been broken once, and lines around his eyes that suggested he smiled often, though he was not smiling now. His hair, what she could see beneath his hat, was dark brown and longer than was fashionable, curling slightly at his collar. "What do you do?" she asked, forcing herself to keep talking to stay conscious. "I've got a ranch about 3 miles from town. Cattle mostly, some horses. It's not much, but it's mine. Built the house and barn myself." There was pride in his voice, the kind that came from honest work and accomplishment. The trail widened as they descended, and Columbia came into view in the valley below, with smoke rising from chimneys, lights beginning to glow in windows as dusk approached. It had been Delilah's home for the past year, since her father had brought them here chasing gold that never materialized. He had ended up working odd jobs, growing more bitter with each passing month, while his new wife spent what little money they had on herself and complained constantly about the hardship of frontier life. But Vincent guided his horse past the town, following a rutted road that led west. Delilah tensed, suddenly aware that she was completely at this stranger's mercy, that despite his kindness, she knew nothing about him or his intentions. He felt her stiffen. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said quietly. "I'm taking you to my ranch because you need warmth and food, and because if I take you into town, someone's going to send for your father, and damned if I'm going to let him get his hands on you again. But if you want me to take you to town, to the hotel or the boarding house, I will." "It's your choice, Delilah." The fact that he gave her a choice, that he acknowledged her right to decide her own fate, made something in her chest loosen. "Your ranch," she said, "please." She felt him nod, felt some of the tension leave his shoulders. "My ranch it is." True to his word, 20 minutes later they were riding through a gate with a simple arch overhead bearing the brand VN. The house was modest but well built, a solid structure of logs with a stone chimney from which smoke was still rising. A barn stood nearby, larger than the house, and Delilah could see several cattle in a fenced pasture and horses in a corral. Vincent dismounted, lifting her down carefully. Her legs still would not hold her weight, and he swept her up again, carrying her toward the house. He kicked the door open and brought her inside, and Delilah found herself in a single large room that served as kitchen, dining area, and living space all at once. A fire burned in the hearth, filling the space with welcome warmth. The furnishings were simple but well made. A table with 4 chairs, a rocking chair near the fire, shelves lined with books and supplies, a cookstove in one corner. He carried her to the rocking chair and set her down gently, then knelt to remove her boots. Delilah tried to protest, but he ignored her, pulling off the worn leather and examining her feet with a practiced eye. "No frostbite that I can see," he said with relief. "Your toes are going to hurt like the devil, but you'll keep them." He looked up at her, and she was struck again by how green his eyes were, how they seemed to see straight through her. "I'm going to tend to my horse, and then I'm going to make you something hot to drink and get some food in you. There's a bedroom through that door." "It's the only bedroom, so you'll take it. I'll sleep out here." "I cannot take your bed," Delilah protested. "Yes, you can and you will." His tone brooked no argument. "I've slept on worse than a floor, believe me." He disappeared back outside, and Delilah sat in the rocking chair, gradually feeling her body thaw. The pain was intense, just as Vincent had warned, but she welcomed it as proof that she was alive, that she had survived what should have killed her. When Vincent returned, stamping snow from his boots, he moved around the kitchen with efficiency, stoking the fire higher, filling a kettle with water from a bucket and setting it to boil. He pulled bread from a box, cheese from a cold cupboard, and dried meat from where it hung near the ceiling. Within minutes, he had assembled a simple meal and was pressing a cup of hot coffee, heavily sweetened, into her hands. "Drink slowly," he instructed. "Your stomach's not going to be happy at first." Delilah sipped the coffee, the heat of it sliding down her throat like liquid heaven. Vincent settled in the other chair, watching her with an intensity that should have made her uncomfortable, but somehow did not. "I meant what I said out there," he told her. "You're under my protection now. I do not care what your father says or what anyone in town thinks. You're staying here until you're strong again and until we figure out what comes next." "I have no money," Delilah said quietly. "No way to pay you back for your kindness. I am not asking for payment." Vincent leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "I'm asking you to let me help. You've been dealt a bad hand, Delilah Turner, and I have the means to make it right. That's enough." Tears stung her eyes, the first she had allowed herself to cry since her father's wagon had disappeared down the trail. "Thank you," she whispered. Vincent nodded, then stood and moved back to the kitchen, assembling a plate of food. He brought it to her and waited while she ate, and Delilah was aware of his eyes on her, not in a way that made her feel like prey, but in a way that made her feel seen, acknowledged, valued. When she had eaten all she could manage, Vincent took the plate and set it aside. "The bedroom's through there," he said, gesturing to the door. "There's a wash basin and clean water, and I'll bring you something to sleep in. The bed's got plenty of blankets. You rest, and we'll talk more in the morning." Delilah stood, her legs steadier now, and moved toward the bedroom. At the doorway, she turned back. "Vincent," he looked up from where he was cleaning the dishes. "Yeah? Why did you say I was yours, out there on the trail?" He was quiet for a moment, his hands stilling in the dishwater. "Because in that moment, you needed someone to claim you, to say you belonged somewhere and to someone. Your family threw you away, but I am not going to. You're under my protection now, and that makes you mine to protect." Does that make sense? It did, in a way that Delilah had not expected. In the harsh world of the frontier, belonging somewhere to someone was often the difference between survival and death. Vincent had claimed her not as property but as responsibility, and there was honor in that. "It makes sense," she said softly, and then she went into the bedroom and closed the door. The room was small but clean, with a bed covered in a patchwork quilt, a dresser, and a washstand. Delilah used the water in the basin to clean her face and hands, wincing at the redness of her skin, the raw places where the cold had bitten deepest. A knock on the door made her turn, and Vincent's arm appeared, holding a folded shirt. "It'll be big on you, but it's clean and warm," he said without coming in. "Thank you." Delilah took the shirt and waited until his footsteps had retreated before changing into it. It hung to her knees, and the sleeves dangled past her hands, but it was soft and smelled faintly of soap and of Vincent himself. a scent she could not quite define but found oddly comforting. She climbed into the bed and pulled the quilts up, her body sinking into the mattress with a sigh of relief. Through the door, she could hear Vincent moving around, banking the fire, settling himself for the night. She should have been afraid, alone in a stranger's house, but instead she felt safer than she had in months, perhaps years. Delilah closed her eyes and let sleep take her. She woke to the smell of coffee and frying bacon, sunshine streaming through the small window. For a moment, she could not remember where she was, and then it all came back in a rush. The cold, the abandonment, Vincent Novak wrapping her in his coat and bringing her here. Delilah rose and dressed in her own clothes, which someone, Vincent presumably, had hung near the fire to dry during the night. They were rumpled but warm, and she was grateful for the return of familiarity. When she emerged from the bedroom, she found Vincent at the stove, cooking breakfast with the same efficiency he had shown the night before. "Morning," he said, glancing over his shoulder. "How are you feeling?" "Sore," Delilah admitted, "but alive. That's what counts." He gestured to the table. "Sit. Breakfast is almost ready." She sat watching him work. In the daylight, she could see the house more clearly. It was neat and well organized, everything in its place, but there was a loneliness to it, a sense that only one person had lived here for a long time. No curtains on the windows, no decorations on the walls, nothing to soften the purely functional nature of the space. Vincent brought plates to the table, eggs and bacon and fresh bread, and sat across from her. They ate in companionable silence for a few minutes before he spoke. "I've been thinking about your situation," he said. "You need work, I need help. I am proposing a trade. You keep the house, do the cooking and cleaning, maybe help with some of the lighter ranch work when you're feeling up to it. In return, you get room and board and a wage. Nothing fancy, but enough to start saving for your future." Delilah set down her fork, studying him. "You do not need a housekeeper. This place is already clean." "It's clean because I work hard at keeping it that way. But I would rather spend that time with the livestock or fixing fences or any of the 100 other things that need doing on a ranch." Vincent met her eyes steadily. "I am not offering you charity, Delilah. I am offering you fair work for fair pay. You take the job or not, that is your choice, but the offer stands." "What about town? What about my father? What about them?" Vincent's jaw tightened. "You're an adult. You can work for whoever you choose. If your father comes around making trouble, I'll deal with him. But I do not think he will. Men like that, who abandon their children, they do not usually come back unless there's something in it for them." The truth of his words stung, but Delilah could not deny them. Her father had made his choice when he left her on that mountainside. She owed him nothing. "All right," she said. "I will take the job, but I want a proper wage, not just room and board. I want to be able to save money to have choices someday." A slow smile spread across Vincent's face, transforming it. "I like a woman who knows her worth. You've got a deal, Miss Turner." He extended his hand across the table, and Delilah shook it, feeling the calluses on his palm, the strength in his grip. This was a business arrangement, nothing more. But as Vincent's hand closed around hers, she felt a flutter in her chest that had nothing to do with business and everything to do with the man sitting across from her. The days that followed fell into a rhythm. Delilah rose with the sun, made breakfast for herself and Vincent, and then set about the work of keeping the house while he tended the ranch. She scrubbed floors and washed clothes, mended torn shirts and darned socks, cooked meals that were more elaborate than the simple fare Vincent had been eating. In the evenings, they would sit by the fire, and Vincent would read aloud from his collection of books, everything from adventure stories to history to poetry. It was during these evenings that Delilah began to understand who Vincent Novak truly was. He had come from Nebraska, the youngest son of a farmer who could barely feed his family. At 18, he had struck out for California with dreams of gold, only to discover that the real gold was in hard work and smart investments. He had worked as a ranch hand, saved every penny, and eventually bought this land with money he had won in a poker game. "I am not proud of the gambling," he admitted one night, the firelight casting shadows across his face. "But I was good at cards, and it was a way to make money faster than breaking my back for pennies. Once I had the ranch, I stopped. This place, it means something to me. It's proof that I am more than what I came from." "You should be proud," Delilah said. "You built something from nothing." "What about you?" Vincent asked. "What did you want before all this happened?" Delilah was quiet for a long moment, staring into the fire. "I wanted a home," she said finally. "After my mother died, nothing felt like home anymore. My father remarried so quickly, and his new wife, she made it clear I was not welcome. I wanted a place where I belonged, where I was wanted." She looked at Vincent. "I know this is just a job, but thank you for giving me that, even temporarily." Something flickered in Vincent's eyes, an emotion she could not quite name. "It does not have to be temporary," he said quietly. "You're good at this work, Delilah, better than good, and I like having you here. The house feels different now, more alive. If you want to stay on permanently, the job is yours." "I would like that," Delilah said, and meant it. In the weeks since Vincent had found her on that frozen hillside, she had begun to feel like herself again, like a person with value and purpose. More than that, she had begun to look forward to Vincent's company, to the sound of his voice reading aloud, to the rare smiles he gave when something pleased him. The problem was that her feelings were beginning to shift from gratitude to something deeper, something that made her heart race when he came in from the cold, his cheeks ruddy and his eyes bright. She found herself watching him when he did not know she was looking, admiring the way he moved, the competence with which he handled every task. At night, lying alone in his bed while he slept on the floor in the main room, she would think about him and wonder if he ever thought about her the same way. It was foolish, she told herself. Vincent had rescued her from death and given her work. She should not mistake kindness for affection, gratitude for love. He had never touched her beyond that first necessary contact, never looked at her with anything but respect and a sort of careful distance, as though he was determined to maintain the boundaries of their arrangement. But sometimes she would catch him watching her with an expression that made her breath hitch, a hunger in his eyes that he quickly shuddered. In those moments, Delilah wondered if perhaps Vincent's feelings were not as simple as he pretended either. February turned to March, and the snow began to melt. Vincent started preparations for spring, repairing fences and checking the cattle, planning for the work ahead. Delilah accompanied him sometimes, learning the rhythms of ranch life, and he taught her with patience, never making her feel foolish for not knowing. One afternoon, they were in the barn together, Vincent showing her how to properly groom a horse, when they heard the sound of approaching riders. Vincent's expression darkened, and he moved to the barn door, his hand resting on the revolver he always wore. 3 men rode into the yard, and Delilah's heart sank when she recognized her father among them. Thomas Turner looked older than his 45 years, worn down by disappointment and drink. The other 2 men were strangers, rough-looking types with guns on their hips and hard eyes. "Delilah," Thomas called, swinging down from his horse. "Get out here, girl. You are coming home." Vincent stepped out of the barn, positioning himself between Thomas and the building where Delilah stood frozen. "She is not going anywhere with you, Turner. You gave up your right to call her daughter when you left her to freeze on that mountainside." Thomas's face flushed with anger. She is my daughter and she will do as I say. I have every legal right to take her home. She is 19 years old, old enough to make her own choices. Vincent's voice was calm but edged with steel. She works for me now, lives here by her own choice. You have no claim on her. The hell I do not, Thomas spat in the dirt. I am her father. That gives me all the claim I need. One of the other men, a burly type with a scar across his cheek, laughed. Maybe we should just take her, Tom. 3 of us, one of him. I like those odds. I would not if I were you. Vincent's hand moved to rest casually on his gun. I am not much for killing, but I will defend what's mine. Delilah works for me. She's under my protection. You try to take her, and this ends badly for all of you. Delilah found her courage and stepped out of the barn, moving to stand beside Vincent. I am not going with you, father. You made your choice when you left me in the frost. I made mine when I accepted Vincent's offer of work. I am staying here. Thomas's eyes narrowed. You are living here. Alone with this man. You have shamed yourself, girl, and our family name. The only shame is yours, Delilah shot back, anger overriding her fear. You abandoned your own daughter to save money. Do not speak to me about family or honor. The scarred man leered at her. Maybe she is more than just his housekeeper, Tom. Maybe she is keeping him warm at night. Vincent moved so fast Delilah barely saw it. One moment he was standing still, the next his fist connected with the man's jaw, sending him sprawling in the dirt. The other stranger reached for his gun, but Vincent had his revolver out and cocked before the man's hand even touched the grip. You will apologize to the lady, Vincent said softly, his voice deadly calm. And then you will get on your horses and leave my property. If any of you come back, if any of you spread lies about Miss Turner in town, I will make you regret it. Are we clear? The scarred man struggled to his feet, rubbing his jaw. You are going to pay for that, Novak. Try it. Vincent's eyes were hard as flint. I fought in the war, boys. Shiloh, Antietam, Gettysburg. I have killed better men than you for worse reasons. Do not test me. There was a long, tense moment where anything could have happened. Then Thomas Turner, always a coward at heart, mounted his horse. Come on, he said to his companions. She is not worth the trouble. The 3 men rode away, and Vincent did not lower his gun until they were out of sight. Then he turned to Delilah, his face concerned. Are you all right? I am fine. But she was trembling, and Vincent holstered his gun and pulled her into his arms, holding her close. I am sorry you had to face that, he said into her hair. I should have known he would come eventually. Delilah pressed her face against his chest, breathing in his scent, feeling the solid strength of him. Thank you for defending me, for not letting them take me. Vincent's arms tightened around her. I told you, you're mine to protect. I do not break my word, Delilah. She looked up at him, and their faces were suddenly very close. She could see the flecks of gold in his green eyes, the faint stubble on his jaw. His gaze dropped to her lips, and for a heartbeat she thought he might kiss her. Instead, he stepped back, releasing her. We should go inside. Make sure they're really gone. The moment was broken, and Delilah felt its loss like a physical ache. She followed Vincent into the house, wondering how much longer she could continue like this, living beside him but not with him, wanting him but too afraid to say so. That night, Vincent was quiet over dinner, his mind clearly elsewhere. Delilah cleaned up the dishes and was about to retreat to the bedroom when he spoke. Delilah, sit down. We need to talk. Her heart hammering, she sat. Vincent leaned back in his chair, studying her with that intense gaze of his. Your father is not going to let this go, he said. He will come back, or he will spread rumors in town, or he will find some other way to make trouble. The law might even be on his side, depending on how he presents things. What are you saying? Delilah asked, though she feared she knew. I am saying we need to make your position here unassailable. There's one way to do that. Vincent took a deep breath. Marry me. Delilah stared at him, certain she had misheard. What? Marry me, Vincent repeated. If you are my wife, your father has no legal claim on you. No one can say anything about you living here. You would be protected, secure. He held up a hand before she could speak. I know this is not romantic. I know I am not offering you love or pretty words, but I can offer you safety and respect and a home that's truly yours. That has to count for something. It counted for everything, and yet Delilah found herself fighting tears. You would marry me just to protect me. That is what you are offering, a marriage of convenience. I am offering you a solution to your problem. Vincent's voice was careful, neutral. What you make of it beyond that is up to you. Delilah stood, her chair scraping back. What I make of it? Vincent, you are asking me to marry you, and you sound like you are discussing a business transaction. Do you truly have no feelings for me beyond duty? My feelings do not matter. Vincent stood as well, his jaw tight. You deserve better than a broke rancher with nothing but this place to his name. You deserve someone who can give you everything, who can take you to fancy places and buy you pretty things. I am not that man. I do not want fancy places or pretty things. Delilah's voice rose, frustration and hurt making her bold. I want honesty, Vincent. I want you to tell me the truth. Do you feel anything for me, or am I truly just an obligation to you? He stared at her, and she saw the war happening behind his eyes, the struggle between what he wanted and what he thought was right. Finally, something in him seemed to break. Damn it, Delilah, he said roughly, closing the distance between them. I feel everything for you. I wake up every morning and the first thing I think about is you. I come in from working and I look forward to seeing your face, hearing your voice. I lie on that floor at night knowing you're in my bed just a few feet away, and it takes everything I have not to go to you. I have been half in love with you since the moment I wrapped you in my coat, and I fall further every damn day. But you have been through hell, and I will not take advantage of that. I will not pressure you into something you might regret. Delilah felt tears spill over, but they were not tears of sadness. You stubborn, honorable fool, she whispered. Do you not understand? I feel the same way. I have been trying so hard not to show it, not to make things awkward, but Vincent, I love you. I have loved you almost from the beginning. The hope that dawned in his eyes was almost painful to see. You love me. Yes, you impossible man, I love you. Delilah reached up to cup his face, feeling the rasp of his beard against her palm. So if you are asking me to marry you, ask me properly. Ask me because you want me, not just because you want to protect me. Vincent's hands came up to frame her face, his touch gentle despite the roughness of his calloused fingers. Delilah Turner, he said, his voice hoarse with emotion. I love you more than I thought it was possible to love anyone. You have brought light into my life, into this house, into my heart. I know I do not have much to offer, but what I have is yours if you will take it. Will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life trying to make you as happy as you have made me? Yes, Delilah breathed. Yes, Vincent, I will marry you. He kissed her then, and it was nothing like Delilah had imagined a first kiss might be. It was desperate and tender all at once, full of all the longing they had both been holding back for weeks. His arms came around her, pulling her close, and she melted into him, her hands sliding into his hair, holding him to her as though she could keep this moment forever. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Vincent rested his forehead against hers. I have dreamed of doing that, he confessed. More times than I can count. Then do not stop now, Delilah said, and pulled him down for another kiss. They were married a week later in Columbia, in the small church that served the community. The ceremony was simple. attended by only a handful of people, including the ranch hand Vincent occasionally hired for big jobs, and the woman who ran the general store who had befriended Delilah on her few trips to town. Thomas Turner did not attend, which suited Delilah fine. She did not need his blessing or his presence to know that what she and Vincent had was real and good and worth celebrating. She wore a simple dress, the best one she owned, and Vincent wore a suit that he admitted he had only worn twice before, both times to funerals. But when he saw her walking toward him in that church, his face transformed with such joy that Delilah knew she had never looked more beautiful in her life. The minister pronounced them husband and wife, and Vincent kissed her in front of God and the few witnesses, staking his claim for all the world to see. Delilah was Mrs. Novak now, no longer Delilah Turner but Delilah Novak, and the name felt right in a way her birth name never had. They held a small celebration at the ranch, and the few guests who came brought food and well wishes. As the sun set and the guests departed, Vincent and Delilah were finally alone. Vincent had lit candles throughout the house, a romantic gesture that made Delilah's heart swell. He approached her almost shyly, this man who had been so confident in everything else. "I want this to be right for you," he said. "If you need time, if you are not ready, I can wait. I have waited this long. I can wait longer." Delilah smiled and took his hands, leading him toward the bedroom that had been his, then hers, and was now theirs. "I have spent enough nights sleeping alone in this bed wishing you were beside me," she said. "I do not want to wait any more, Vincent. I want to be your wife in every way." What passed between them that night was tender and sweet, and occasionally awkward in the way of two people learning each other for the first time. But it was also full of love and laughter, and a deep sense of rightness. Vincent was patient and gentle, putting her pleasure before his own, and when they finally came together completely, Delilah understood what it meant to be truly joined to another person, body and soul. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the bed, Vincent's arm around her, her head on his chest. Delilah traced idle patterns on his skin, feeling utterly content. "I cannot believe this is my life now," she said softly. "A few months ago I was freezing to death on a mountainside. Now I am here, married to the best man I have ever known." Vincent pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "You saved me too, you know. I did not realize how lonely I was until you came along and made me understand what I was missing. This house was just a structure before. Now it is a home because you are in it." They talked late into the night, sharing dreams and fears, making plans for the future. Vincent wanted to expand the ranch, maybe buy more land, raise more cattle. Delilah wanted to plant a garden in the spring, to make curtains for the windows, to fill the house with warmth and beauty. They wanted children eventually, a family to fill the rooms and carry on what they were building together. As dawn approached and they finally drifted toward sleep, Delilah thought about the strange path that had led her here. If her father had not abandoned her, if Vincent had not been riding that particular trail on that particular day, if she had died in the frost as she so easily could have, none of this would exist. In a way, she owed her happiness to the very cruelty that had nearly destroyed her. But that was the nature of life, she supposed. Light and dark, joy and sorrow, all tangled together in ways that did not always make sense but somehow led you where you were meant to be. Spring arrived in full force, transforming the landscape. Delilah threw herself into making the ranch truly theirs, planting a garden of vegetables and flowers, making curtains and tablecloths, adding small touches of beauty wherever she could. Vincent worked from dawn until dusk, tending the cattle and horses, repairing winter damage, preparing for the work of summer. In the evenings, they would sit on the porch Vincent built, watching the sun set over the mountains and talk about everything and nothing. Delilah learned about Vincent's childhood in Nebraska, about the brother who had died of fever when Vincent was 12, about the father who drank too much, and the mother who had worked herself to death, trying to hold the family together. She understood then why Vincent had left, why building something of his own mattered so much to him. In turn, she told him about her own childhood, about a mother who had been gentle and kind, who had taught Delilah to read and to think for herself. She told him about the pain of losing her mother to illness, about watching her father retreat into himself, and then, barely a year later, remarry a woman who saw Delilah as nothing but an inconvenience. "I hated her for a long time," Delilah admitted, "but now I almost feel grateful. If she had not convinced my father to abandon me, I would never have found you. I prefer not to think about what might have happened if I had not been on that trail," Vincent said, his arm tightening around her. "The thought of you dying there, alone and afraid, it makes me sick." "But I did not die. You found me. You saved me." Delilah turned in his embrace to face him. "You gave me more than just my life back, Vincent. You gave me a reason to want to live it." He kissed her, and as always, the touch of his lips on her sent heat coursing through her body. Even after weeks of marriage, the desire between them had not dimmed. If anything, it had grown stronger as they learned each other's bodies, discovered what brought pleasure and what brought even greater pleasure. That night, Vincent carried her to bed and they made love slowly, thoroughly, drawing out each moment until they were both trembling with need. And afterward, wrapped in each other's arms, Delilah felt a certainty settle in her bones. This was where she belonged. This was home. The summer brought hard work but also prosperity. The cattle thrived and Vincent was able to sell several at good prices. He came home one evening in late July with a package wrapped in brown paper, which he presented to Delilah with a shy smile. "What is this?" she asked, taking the package. "Open it and see." Inside was fabric, beautiful green calico printed with small white flowers. Delilah gasped. "Vincent, this is lovely, but you should not have spent money on this." "You deserve something pretty," he said. "You work so hard, Delilah. You have made this place a home. The least I can do is buy you fabric for a new dress." Delilah threw her arms around him, overwhelmed by the thoughtfulness of the gesture. Vincent was not a demonstrative man by nature, but he showed his love in 1,000 small ways. Bringing her wildflowers from the fields, fixing the rocking chair when it started to squeak, making sure she did not work too hard in the heat. In August, Delilah began to suspect that she might be pregnant. Her monthly courses, always regular, did not come. She felt tired in a way that had nothing to do with work, and certain smells that had never bothered her before now made her stomach turn. She said nothing to Vincent at first, afraid to get his hopes up in case she was wrong. But when another week passed with no sign of her courses, she could not keep the news to herself any longer. She told him one evening after dinner, simply and directly. "Vincent, I think I am going to have a baby." He went very still, his eyes wide. "Are you certain as I can be without seeing a doctor? I have missed my courses and I have been feeling strange, tired and queasy." For a long moment, Vincent just stared at her. Then a smile broke across his face, so wide and joyful that it transformed him. "A baby," he said, his voice full of wonder. "We are going to have a baby." He pulled her into his arms, holding her carefully as though she might break. "Delilah, you have made me the happiest man alive. A baby." "Our baby. Are you pleased?" Delilah asked, though she could see the answer in his face. "Pleased, Delilah, I am beyond pleased. I am overjoyed, terrified but overjoyed." He pulled back to look at her. "Are you happy? Is this what you want?" "Yes," Delilah said and realized it was true. A few months ago, The thought of bringing a child into the world would have filled her with dread. But now, with Vincent beside her in a home that was truly hers, she could imagine nothing more wonderful than a baby, a tangible symbol of the love they shared. The next day, Vincent insisted on taking her to see the doctor in Colombia, despite her protests that it was too early to be sure. But the doctor confirmed what Delilah already knew. She was about 2 months along, and if all went well, they could expect a baby sometime in late February or early March. "You need to take it easy," the doctor instructed. "No heavy lifting, plenty of rest. Have your husband do the hard work around the house." "That will not be a problem," Vincent said firmly. "She will rest, even if I have to tie her to the rocking chair." Delilah laughed, but Vincent was true to his word. He took over most of the household chores, insisting that she do nothing more strenuous than cooking and light cleaning. He brought her breakfast in bed, fussed over her constantly, and worried about everything from what she ate to whether she was too warm or too cold. "Vincent, I am pregnant, not dying," Delilah finally said one day, exasperated by his hovering. "Women have babies every day. I am going to be fine." "I know that," Vincent said, but his eyes were troubled. "But you are my wife, and that is my child you are carrying. I cannot help but worry." Delilah softened. "I love you for caring so much, but you need to trust that I know my own body. I will tell you if something feels wrong." He nodded, but she could see the effort it cost him to step back, to let her have her independence. Vincent Novak, she had learned, was a man who protected what he loved with fierce intensity. It was both endearing and occasionally frustrating. As summer turned to autumn, Delilah's body began to change. Her belly swelled and her breasts grew tender and heavy. She felt the baby move for the first time in late September, a flutter like the brush of butterfly wings, and she cried out in wonder, calling Vincent in from the barn to feel it. He pressed his hand to her belly, his face rapt with concentration. When the baby moved again, stronger this time, his eyes filled with tears. "That is our child," he said, his voice choked. "Our baby, Delilah." They stood there together, his hand on her belly, feeling the life they had created together move and grow. In that moment, Delilah felt a completeness that she had never known existed, a sense of being exactly where she was supposed to be, doing exactly what she was meant to do. The autumn was busy with preparations. Vincent expanded the bedroom, building a small addition to create a nursery. Delilah sewed baby clothes from soft flannel, tiny gowns and blankets and diapers. The women from town, hearing of the impending birth, stopped by with gifts and advice, and Delilah found herself building friendships she had not expected. One afternoon in late October, as Delilah was hanging laundry in the yard, a wagon pulled up to the house. She tensed, fearing it might be her father again, but the woman who climbed down was a stranger, well-dressed and middle-aged with kind eyes. "Mrs. Novak?" the woman asked. "I am Margaret Hawthorne. I run the boarding house in town. I heard about your situation, about what your father did, and I wanted to come see if you were all right." Delilah invited her in, and over tea, Margaret told her story. She had been abandoned by her own family years ago for marrying a man they deemed unsuitable. She understood what it was like to be cast out, to have to build a new life from nothing. "I want you to know that you have friends in Colombia," Margaret said. "Your father has been spreading some unpleasant rumors, but most people do not believe him. We know Vincent Novak. He is a good man, and if he married you, it is because he loves you, not because of anything shameful." Delilah felt tears prick her eyes. "Thank you. That means more to me than you know." "There is one other thing," Margaret hesitated. "Your father is leaving Colombia. He and his wife are moving to Sacramento. I thought you should know." Delilah sat with that information for a moment, trying to sort through her feelings. Relief was the strongest emotion, but there was also a strange sort of grief for what might have been, for the father she had once known before grief and bitterness had changed him. "I hope he finds what he is looking for," she said finally, "but I am glad he will be gone. I want to raise my child without the shadow of his anger hanging over us." When Vincent came in that evening, Delilah told him about Margaret's visit and the news about her father. He listened quietly, then pulled her into his arms. "How do you feel about it?" he asked, relieved mostly. "A little sad, but mostly relieved." She looked up at him. "Is that terrible of me?" "No, it is human. He hurt you, Delilah. You do not owe him anything, not even your grief." Vincent kissed her forehead. "What matters now is our family, the life we are building together. The past is behind us." Winter came early that year, snow falling in November and continuing through December. Delilah grew larger, her movements awkward, her back aching. Vincent hired a woman from town, Mrs. Chen, to come stay with them as Delilah's due date approached. Mrs. Chen was a Chinese immigrant who had delivered dozens of babies and knew her craft well. Her presence eased both Delilah's and Vincent's nerves. Christmas arrived, and Vincent cut a small pine tree and brought it inside. Decorating it with strings of berries and small ornaments Delilah had made from scraps of fabric and paper. It was their first Christmas together, and they exchanged simple gifts: a new pair of gloves for Vincent, a book of poetry for Delilah. But the greatest gift was simply being together, warm and safe, anticipating the arrival of their child. The baby came on the last day of February, a long and difficult labor that left Delilah exhausted but filled with fierce joy when Mrs. Chen placed the infant in her arms. A boy, healthy and strong, with dark hair and eyes that would, Mrs. Chen predicted, turn green like his father's. Vincent was beside himself, crying unashamedly as he looked down at his son. "He is perfect," he kept saying. "Delilah, he is perfect." They named him Samuel Vincent Novak, Samuel after Delilah's grandfather and Vincent to carry on his father's name. Little Samuel was a good baby, eating well and sleeping in stretches that allowed his exhausted parents to rest as well. In the weeks after Samuel's birth, as Delilah recovered and they settled into the rhythms of parenthood, she often found herself reflecting on the journey that had brought her here. Less than 18 months ago, she had been dying in the frost, abandoned and alone. Now she had a husband who loved her, a son who depended on her, and a home that was truly hers. One evening in early April, with Samuel asleep in his cradle and the spring air soft through the open windows, Delilah and Vincent sat together on the porch. He had his arm around her and she leaned into his warmth, utterly content. "Do you ever think about that day?" Vincent asked quietly. "The day I found you." "All the time," Delilah admitted. "I think about how close I came to dying, and then I think about you riding up like something out of a story. You saved me, Vincent." "We saved each other," he corrected. "You gave me a reason to come home at night, a reason to build something that would last. Before you, I was just existing. Now I am living." Delilah turned to kiss him, a soft press of lips that held all the love and gratitude she could not put into words. When she pulled back, Vincent was smiling, that rare, open smile that transformed his whole face. "I love you, Delilah Novak," he said. "More than I knew it was possible to love anyone." "I love you too," she replied. "Thank you for wrapping me in your coat. Thank you for claiming me. Thank you for giving me a life worth living." The years passed, each one building on the foundation they had laid. The ranch prospered, and Vincent was able to buy more land, hire more help. Delilah's garden flourished, providing vegetables for their table and beauty for their eyes. They had 2 more children, a daughter named Lily Rose in 1878, and another son, Thomas Matthew, in 1880, named for the brother Vincent had lost, not for Delilah's father. With each child, their family grew stronger, their home more filled with love and laughter. Samuel grew into a serious boy who loved animals and spent hours following his father around the ranch. Lily was all fire and stubbornness, fearless in a way that both delighted and terrified her parents. Thomas was the baby, sweet-natured and affectionate, always ready with a hug or a kiss. Delilah sometimes saw her father in town, in the years before he left for Sacramento. He never approached her, and she never approached him. There was nothing left to say. She had made her peace with his choices and her own. She had a family now, a real family, built on love and commitment rather than obligation. Vincent proved to be an excellent father, patient and playful with his children while still maintaining the discipline they needed. He taught Samuel to ride and rope, helped Lily overcome her fear of the dark, rocked Thomas to sleep when nightmares woke him. He was the kind of father he had never had, determined to give his children the security and love he had lacked. On their 5th anniversary, Vincent surprised Delilah with a trip to San Francisco. They left the children with Mrs. Chen and spent 3 days exploring the city, eating in restaurants, seeing plays, acting like the young couple they had never really had a chance to be. It was magical, and it reminded them both that while they were parents and ranchers and a dozen other things, they were also still Vincent and Delilah, two people who had found each other against all odds and built something beautiful together. The night before they returned home, as they lay in a hotel bed far grander than their own, Vincent turned to Delilah with a serious expression. "I want you to know," he said, "that these have been the happiest years of my life. You and the children, the ranch, all of it. This is everything I ever wanted and more than I thought I deserved." "You deserve all of it and more," Delilah said fiercely. "You are the best man I know, Vincent Novak. You are a wonderful husband and father. Our children are lucky to have you, and so am I." He kissed her then, and what followed was tender and passionate, a reaffirmation of the bond between them. Even after 5 years of marriage, the desire had not faded. If anything, it had deepened, matured into something richer and more complex than the initial passion. They returned home to find the children had been perfect angels for Mrs. Chen, which both parents suspected was not entirely true but appreciated nonetheless. Samuel had lost a tooth, Lily had learned a new song, and Thomas had taken his first steps. Life went on, each day bringing new challenges and new joys. In 1882, Vincent was elected to the town council, recognition of the respect he had earned in the community. He served faithfully, always advocating for the common people, for fair treatment and honest dealing. Delilah was proud of him, though she teased him about becoming a politician. "I am not a politician," he would protest. "I am a rancher who happens to sit on the council." "You are whatever you say you are, dear," Delilah would reply with a smile, and he would pull her close and kiss her until they both forgot what they were arguing about. By 1885, Samuel was 10 years old and already showing signs of inheriting his father's skill with horses and cattle. Lily, at 7, was a force of nature who kept her parents on their toes with her endless curiosity and fearless adventures. Thomas, at 5, was attending the small school that had been built in Columbia and surprising everyone with his quick mind and love of books. One evening in late summer, with the children in bed and the house quiet, Vincent and Delilah sat on their porch as they had done countless times before. The ranch stretched out before them, prosperous and beautiful, a testament to years of hard work and dedication. "Do you remember what you said to me that first night?" Delilah asked. "When you brought me here." "I said a lot of things that night," Vincent replied, but she could hear the smile in his voice. You said I was yours, that you were taking me home. I remember." His arm tightened around her. "Best decision I ever made." "I thought I was going to die that day," Delilah said softly. "I had given up hope, and then you appeared like an answer to a prayer I had not even thought to pray." "I think about that sometimes," Vincent admitted. "About how easily I could have taken a different trail, how I almost decided to wait another day before going to town. All the tiny decisions that led me to that exact spot at that exact time. It feels like fate." Maybe it was. Delilah turned to look at him, this man who had saved her life and then given her a reason to live it. His face was more weathered now, lines around his eyes and silver beginning to thread through his dark hair. But to her, he had never been more handsome. "All I know is that I am grateful for every day I have with you, Vincent. You took a broken girl and helped her become a whole woman. You gave me a family, a home, a purpose. You gave me everything." "You did the same for me," Vincent said, cupping her face in his hand. "I was just going through the motions before you came along. Now every day has meaning because I get to spend it with you." They kissed, a slow, sweet kiss that held 10 years of love and partnership and shared dreams. When they pulled apart, Vincent stood and offered his hand. "Come to bed, Mrs. Novak," he said. "I want to show my wife just how much I appreciate her." Delilah laughed and took his hand, letting him lead her inside. The house was quiet around them, their children safe and sleeping, their life together solid and good. As Vincent closed the bedroom door behind them and pulled her into his arms, Delilah sent up a silent prayer of gratitude for the cowboy who had wrapped her in his coat and claimed her as his own, for the love that had grown between them, for the family they had built together. She had been left in the frost by her family, abandoned and alone, but Vincent Novak had found her, had saved her, had loved her. And in doing so, he had given her something she had never truly had before. A home, not just a place to live, but a place to belong, to be wanted, to be cherished. The years continued to unfold, each one adding new chapters to their story. They faced challenges, as all families do, droughts that tested their resources, illnesses that frightened them, the normal trials of raising children and running a ranch. But they faced everything together, partners in the truest sense of the word. Samuel grew into a fine young man, steady and reliable like his father. At 18, he began courting a girl from town, the daughter of the blacksmith, and Vincent and Delilah approved heartily. The wedding was planned for the following spring, and Delilah found herself preparing to become a mother-in-law, marveling at how quickly time had passed. Lily, at 15, was already breaking hearts in Columbia with her beauty and spirit. She had declared that she wanted to become a teacher, and both Vincent and Delilah supported her ambition, even though it was unusual for young women of their station. They had raised their daughter to think for herself, to pursue her dreams, and they would not stand in her way now. Thomas, at 13, remained the bookworm of the family, his nose always in a book when he was not doing his chores. He talked about becoming a lawyer someday, using words and logic to help people the way his father had helped people through action and honor. Vincent and Delilah, now in their mid-40s, had settled into a comfortable rhythm. They still ran the ranch together, though they had enough help now that the work was not as physically demanding as it had once been. They still sat on the porch in the evenings, still made love with the passion of newlyweds, still talked about everything and nothing. One spring day in 1890, 15 years after that fateful day when Vincent had found Delilah in the frost, they made a journey together back to that hillside. They had never been back, had never had a reason to, but Delilah had woken that morning with a need to see it again, to confront the place where she had nearly died and recognize how far she had come. They rode together on Vincent's horse, just as they had that first day, and when they reached the spot, Delilah asked him to stop. She slid down from the saddle and stood looking at the hillside, trying to remember what it had felt like to believe she was going to die there. It seemed impossible now, looking back. That terrified, frozen girl seemed like someone else entirely, someone from a story she had heard rather than lived. Delilah Turner was gone, transformed into Delilah Novak, wife and mother, rancher and friend, a woman who knew her own worth and her own strength. Vincent came to stand beside her, his hand finding hers. "Are you all right?" he asked quietly. "I am better than all right," Delilah said. She turned to him, this man who had saved her in every way a person could be saved. "Thank you, Vincent, for everything, for my life, for our life together. I know I have said it before, but I want to say it here in this place. Thank you, Delilah." His voice was thick with emotion. "You have given me far more than I ever gave you. You have given me purpose and joy and a family. You have made me a better man than I ever thought I could be." "We have made each other better," Delilah said. "That is what love does. It transforms us." They stood together on that hillside, hands clasped, looking out over the landscape that had witnessed the beginning of their story. The sun was warm on their faces, birds sang in the trees, and life stretched out before them, full of possibility and promise. Vincent pulled Delilah close and she rested her head on his shoulder, breathing in the familiar scent of him. After a few moments of peaceful silence, he spoke. "Ready to go home?" he asked. Delilah smiled. "Yes," she said. "Let's go home." They mounted the horse together, Vincent's arms secure around her as they had been 15 years ago, and rode back toward the ranch. Behind them, the hillside where Delilah had nearly died remained unchanged, but ahead of them was everything that mattered: their home, their children, their life together. That evening, with all 3 children gathered around the dinner table, sharing stories of their day, Delilah looked at the faces she loved most in the world. Samuel, so like his father in temperament and looks. Lily, fierce and independent, charting her own course. Thomas, thoughtful and kind, seeing the world through eyes unclouded by cynicism. And Vincent, her husband, her partner, her love, the man who had claimed her when she needed someone to belong to and who had never let her go. This was her family. This was her home. This was the life she had built from the ashes of abandonment and despair. And it was more beautiful than anything she could have imagined on that frozen hillside all those years ago. After dinner, after the children had gone to bed, Vincent and Delilah stood together at the window of their bedroom, looking out at the ranch bathed in moonlight. Vincent's arms came around her from behind, and she leaned back against him, utterly content. "I love you, Delilah Novak," he murmured against her hair. "From that first moment when I saw you in the frost until my last breath, I will love you." "And I love you, Vincent Novak," Delilah replied, turning in his arms to face him. "You are my home, my heart, my everything." They kissed, a kiss that held 15 years of love and partnership and shared dreams, a kiss that promised 15 more years and beyond. And as Vincent lifted her and carried her to their bed, as they came together with the passion and tenderness that had never faded, Delilah knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she belonged. She had been left in the frost by her family, abandoned to die. But a cowboy had wrapped his coat around her and said she was his, and in that moment, her true life had begun. Everything that came before was prologue. Everything that came after was the story of a love that had saved 2 broken people and made them whole. A love that had created a family and built a legacy that would endure for generations. Years later, when Delilah and Vincent were old and gray, surrounded by children and grandchildren, they would sit on that porch they had built together and tell the story of how they met. The details never changed. The frost, the hillside, the coat, the promise. And every time they told it, their children and grandchildren would listen with rapt attention, because it was the foundation story of their family, the moment when everything began. But on this night, in 1890, with their life together still unfolding and so many years ahead of them, Delilah and Vincent simply held each other close and gave thanks for the journey that had brought them together. They had found each other against all odds, had built something strong and true and lasting. And that, Delilah thought as she drifted toward sleep in her husband's arms, was the greatest miracle of all. The ranch continued to thrive as the years rolled forward. Samuel married his sweetheart in a beautiful spring ceremony in 1891, and by 1892, Vincent and Delilah became grandparents for the first time when Samuel and his wife welcomed a baby girl. Holding that tiny infant in her arms, Delilah was overwhelmed with emotion, seeing the continuation of the family she and Vincent had created together. Lily achieved her dream of becoming a teacher, taking a position at the Columbia School in 1893. She was passionate about education, particularly about ensuring that all children, regardless of their background, had access to learning. Delilah saw echoes of herself in her daughter's determination to make her own way in the world, and she was fiercely proud. Thomas did indeed pursue law, heading to San Francisco to study when he turned 18 in 1895. It was hard to see him go, but Delilah and Vincent knew they had raised their children to be independent, to chase their dreams. Thomas promised to visit often and to write weekly, promises he kept faithfully. By 1900, as the new century dawned, Vincent and Delilah found themselves in their mid-50s, their children grown and launched into lives of their own, but still close, still connected. Samuel ran the ranch with his father, learning everything Vincent had to teach him so that one day he could take over completely. Lily had married a fellow teacher, a kind man who appreciated her intelligence and spirit, and they were expecting their first child. Thomas had passed the bar exam and was practicing law in San Francisco, already making a name for himself as an advocate for the underserved. Vincent and Delilah had 5 grandchildren now, with more on the way, and the house that had once seemed so large with just the 2 of them now rang with the laughter and chaos of family gatherings. During holidays, when everyone came home, the dinner table stretched nearly the length of the room, filled with food and conversation and love. One evening, after one such gathering, Vincent and Delilah found themselves alone again, the house quiet after days of happy noise. They sat in their familiar spot on the porch, Vincent's arm around Delilah's shoulders, both of them tired but content. "We did well, did we not?" Vincent said softly. "With the children, with the ranch, with all of it, we did better than well," Delilah replied. "We created something beautiful, Vincent. A family built on love, children who know their worth and who are making their own marks on the world. That is a legacy to be proud of." "I am proud," Vincent said, "but mostly I am grateful. Grateful that I rode that trail on that day, grateful that I found you, grateful for every moment we have had together." Delilah turned to look at him, this man who had been her husband for 25 years. His hair was silver now, his face lined with the passage of time, but his eyes were still that remarkable green, and when he looked at her, she still felt like the most treasured woman in the world. "I am grateful too," she said, "for all of it. The good and the difficult, the triumphs and the struggles, because we faced it all together and that made all the difference." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars appear in the darkening sky. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled and the cattle lowed softly in response. The sounds of the ranch, the sounds of home, You remember what you said to me that night after you found me? Delilah asked. When I asked why you said I was yours. I said you needed someone to claim you, to say you belonged somewhere and to someone, Vincent replied. That you were under my protection. I have thought about that so many times over the years, Delilah said. How right you were. I did need that, needed someone to claim me. But Vincent, somewhere along the way it became more than protection. It became partnership, it became love. You claimed me that day, but I claimed you too. We chose each other every day for 25 years. And I will keep choosing you, Vincent said, pulling her closer. For however many years we have left, Delilah, you are still mine and I am still yours. Always, Delilah agreed and kissed him, this man who had wrapped her in his coat and changed the course of her life forever. The years continued their steady march. More grandchildren came. The ranch passed fully into Samuel's capable hands, though Vincent remained involved in an advisory capacity. Delilah and Vincent grew older together, their bodies slowing but their love as strong as ever. In 1910, they celebrated their 35th wedding anniversary with a party that brought the entire family together. Children, grandchildren, and even a few great-grandchildren filled the house and yard. As Delilah looked at the sea of faces, all connected to her and Vincent, all evidence of the life they had built together, she felt a profound sense of accomplishment and joy. Vincent gave a speech that night, his voice still strong despite his 70 years. He talked about the journey that had brought them here, about the terrified young woman he had found in the frost and the courageous woman she had become. He talked about love and partnership, about building a life together one day at a time, about the importance of family and community. 35 years ago, he said, looking directly at Delilah, I made a promise to protect a young woman who had been abandoned by those who should have cherished her. I wrapped her in my coat and told her she was mine. I did not know then that she would become my whole world, that she would give me a family and a purpose and a love deeper than I knew existed. Delilah Novak, you are the best thing that ever happened to me, and I thank God every day that I was on that trail when you needed me most. There was not a dry eye in the house when he finished, and Delilah stood and embraced her husband, this man who had been her savior, her partner, her love for 35 years. The applause was thunderous, and their grandchildren crowded around them, wanting to hear the story of how Grandma and Grandpa met, even though they had heard it 100 times before. As the evening wound down and the guests began to depart, Delilah and Vincent found themselves once again on their porch, the place where they had shared so many conversations, so many dreams, so many quiet moments of contentment. 35 years, Delilah mused. Sometimes it feels like yesterday, sometimes it feels like forever. It has been the best 35 years of my life, Vincent said. And if God grants us 35 more, I will spend every one of them loving you. They both knew that 35 more years was unlikely at their age, but the sentiment touched Delilah deeply. She rested her head on Vincent's shoulder, feeling the steady beat of his heart, and allowed herself to simply be in this moment, to appreciate the incredible journey that had brought them here. The years that followed were gentler, quieter. Vincent's health began to fail slowly, his body finally giving in to 7 decades of hard living and hard work. But his mind remained sharp, and his love for Delilah never wavered. She cared for him with the same devotion he had shown her all those years ago, ensuring his comfort, reading to him when his eyes grew too tired, simply sitting with him when words were not needed. On a spring morning in 1915, 40 years after he had found her in the frost, Vincent Novak passed away peacefully in his sleep, Delilah beside him as she had been for their entire marriage. He was 75 years old, and he had lived a full, rich life, surrounded by love until his very last breath. The grief was crushing, even though Delilah had known it was coming. Vincent had been her anchor, her North Star, her home for 4 decades. The house felt impossibly empty without him, despite being filled with children and grandchildren who had come to support her. But as the days passed and the initial shock of loss began to fade, Delilah found comfort in the memories, in the legacy they had built together. Vincent lived on in their children, in the ranch he had built, in the lives he had touched. He lived on in Delilah's heart, where he would remain until her own last breath. She stayed on at the ranch, cared for by Samuel and his family but maintaining her independence. She tended her garden, spent time with her grandchildren and great-grandchildren, and found peace in the rhythms of life that she and Vincent had established so many years ago. In the evenings, she would sit on the porch, in the spot where she and Vincent had sat together for 40 years, and she would talk to him. She would tell him about her day, about the children, about the way the sunset looked or how the cattle were doing. And sometimes, in the quiet of the night, she could almost feel him there beside her, his arm around her shoulders, his voice telling her that he loved her. Delilah lived for another 5 years after Vincent's death, remaining active and engaged with her family until the very end. When she passed away peacefully in her sleep in 1920, at the age of 64, her children and grandchildren gathered to mourn but also to celebrate. She had lived a full life, had been loved deeply and had loved in return, and she had left behind a legacy that would endure for generations. They buried her beside Vincent, on a hillside overlooking the ranch they had built together. The headstone reads simply, Delilah Novak, beloved wife and mother, 1856-1920. But those who knew her story knew that she was so much more than those simple words could convey. She was the girl who had been left to die in the frost and who had survived. She was the woman who had been claimed by a cowboy with a good heart and who had claimed him in return. She was the mother who had raised 3 children to be strong and independent. She was the grandmother who had loved without reservation. She was proof that even from the darkest moments, new life could grow, that love could heal even the deepest wounds, that family was not just about blood but about choice and commitment. The ranch continued on, passed down through generations, each one adding their own chapter to the story that Vincent and Delilah had begun. And on warm spring evenings, when the sun set over the mountains and the breeze carried the scent of pine and wildflowers, you could almost see them there on the porch, Vincent's arm around Delilah's shoulders, both of them watching over the family and the home they had created together. Because some loves are strong enough to transcend death, strong enough to echo through time, strong enough to become legend. And the love between Vincent Novak and Delilah Turner Novak was exactly that kind of love. It had begun with a simple act of kindness on a frozen hillside, with a coat and a promise and 3 simple words, "You're mine now." But it had grown into something epic, something beautiful, something that would be remembered and retold for as long as the ranch stood and the family endured. Their story was complete now, the circle closed, the ending as perfect as any beginning could hope for. They had lived, they had loved, they had built something that mattered. And in the end, that was all anyone could ask for. A life well lived, a love deeply felt, and a legacy that would last long after they were gone.